We're going to talk about triggers and layers and showing different layers based on triggers. So here's an example where we have some buttons here. You can see that you can press them, and when you press them, information comes up about that button, land, and sea. So we have earth, land, and sea. So this is a little interaction to, just to play around. So yeah, it's working good. These are the buttons, and we're triggering layers, and the layers each have an image on them. So let's look and see how to build that. We'll build that from scratch. I'll add a new scene, click into it, and I need some buttons. So I'm going to insert some buttons, add one, let's see, and I think I can control drag 1, 2, 3. So we've got 3, and I'll name them, let's see, earth, land, sea. And let's make the font size a little bit bigger on those. You want to see them, well, at least 18. Why don't we just go for 24? That's pretty good, and I think we can resize them all if we select them and just drag them in a little bit. If they're all selected, they all resize at once, and I think we can also arrange them by aligning and getting them all aligned to the centers, and that's looking pretty good. So now these are buttons, and we want them to do something. We want them to trigger a layer to show. Down here is the layer panel. We just got one layer here, just our untitled slide. Actually, let's just go ahead and name this slide triggered layers. And so that's our base layer. This always shows, no matter what we do in here, these buttons will always be there. So this is kind of our little controls for this particular layer interaction. And so those are the layers, and the triggers are up here where we'll add triggers to make this all happen. And every slide comes with a couple of triggers just to do the navigation. When we preview this slide, we can look down in the bottom right of it, and we see our left and right navigation through the module, and that's due to these two triggers that are just automatically put there for every slide that you ever add. But we need to add our own, and we need to add some layers first. We need layers for the images. I'm going to put an image of earth, land, and sea every time. So I've got this layer. I'm on 1, 2, 3 layers. Just go ahead and name them while we're at it. Earth, land, sea. Okay, go to the earth layer, and we'll insert an image of the earth. Press enter, see what we got. Double click it. There it is. We'll resize it. Put it in there. Use these guides to see if we can kind of get it kind of nicely centered with everything. Good. And we'll now go to land, and we'll insert that. We'll go to illustration, type in land. Press enter. Scroll, just double click this one, and it comes in. We'll resize that. And that's looking pretty good. Yeah. Let's make sure is it lined up? Pretty good. Good enough. Good enough. Now let's go to the sea layer, and we'll do the same thing, but we'll add a sea image, SEA, enter. And the first thing we get, and we'll resize that a little bit, put that in there. Okay, good enough. Well, good enough. All right, so we have these slide layers for the different images to go along with these buttons. And here's the base layer, here's the sea layer, the land layer, the earth layer. And so that's and the name of the slide is Triggered Layers, which is also the base layer where our buttons are that hold our triggers. So now that we've got the layers, we need to trigger them. So let's start with the earth button and add a trigger. So we'll with the earth button selected, we'll go over here to the triggers panel and create a new trigger. And we want to show layer. These are where you kind of program it here. You show the layer because you can tell it to do lots of different things, but we're just showing the layer. And we want to show the layer earth, which is down here we see. So that's what it's going to do. When do we do that? When the user clicks button 1. What's button 1? Button 1 is where we typed earth. So that's these are the text that we typed, and these are the buttons. Okay, so we should name these. Sometimes it's better to name these, but we know it's button 1. So that looks good. And let's do the same thing for land. We'll add a new trigger with that selected, and we'll show the layer land when user clicks button 2 down here. Okay, that looks good. And let's go to sea, and we'll add a new trigger, and we'll show the layer sea when the user clicks button number 3. That's number 3, so that's good. Okay, so our triggers are on there. The triggers are kind of hard to remember, button 1, 2, and 3, so why don't we make it easier to read all this over here by titling this all right. So I'll just let me retype this stuff. Earth, that's that object. We'll rename these buttons are objects, and we'll rename them to be what they are so that the triggers make a little more sense. And see over there in the triggers panel, these are already populating with those names. Looks a little bit better and easier to stay organized that way. So everything's labeled good. Everybody's got a trigger. We see these triggers and we twirl them open and down like that, and what's happening. All right, and now we want to be on the base layer to do all those triggers, and maybe some instruction of some kind when the user lands here, tell them what to do. So let's bring a text box in here and just say click. Let me take caps lock off. Click the buttons to learn more. Okay, let me select that and make it a little bit bigger and bold it and kind of, yeah. All right, good enough. We'll save that and let's see, we'll preview it and see if it works. Okay, earth, land, sea. Yeah, that's pretty good. It's working. So we'll twirl those down. So these are the player triggers. Those are these trigger the player, and the player is this interface that wraps around the slide that we just built, and here are those triggers. So the triggers panel is going to always have some of those, but these are the ones we just added, are these triggers that attach to these buttons and then show these slide layers when they're clicked. And that's a really basic example of how to build interactivity on a single slide using some buttons that users can click and some layers, and you can put anything on the layers. And that is how to build it.